Hi, welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to be sharing with you another unpopular opinion, and it is that I don't believe that everybody should homeschool and that homeschool is not for everybody. And so if you enjoy this type of content and other homeschool and lifestyle content, please remember to subscribe and let's get into it. Recently, someone asked me if they should homeschool one of their kids. They have multiple children, but there was just one that specifically was struggling, and they wanted to know if they should homeschool them or not. And for me, when these kind of questions come up, it's hard because I don't want to give you a yes or a no answer. I feel like that's for you to discover and decide on your own after you get all the facts. And then for me, being a Christian and a prayerful person, going to God and figuring it all out. And I am fine giving feedback and giving insights that I have gained. But I won't tell you yes or no. It's kind of a tricky thing because I think sometimes we go to people who we see as understanding a concept better than maybe we do, and we want them to say, yes, do this, or no, don't do that. And it's hard for us when they don't tell us those things. So anyways, this question got me thinking about homeschooling and whether or not homeschool is for everyone. Obviously, I've thought about that before, but it led me down like a path of making some points because I was responding to them. I was like, oh, this could be helpful for other people probably too. And so I'm going to go through a few of the points that I mentioned to them and share it with you in hopes that maybe it'll be helpful. Maybe you'll have further insights into it as well. Maybe you've had similar questions come up. Maybe you're considering homeschool. There's a whole variety of questions that it could help answer. And I am not sure how this question is received in the homeschool community, to be honest. I'm sure there's some people that homeschool that think that you only should homeschool and that is the only option. There's people that have their kids in public school that probably think that way, that kids should go to public school or they're going to be messed up, all these different things. The list goes on and on. There's a variety of people in between. And I realized that I was in between, and homeschooling was never something that I had planned on doing. I have mentioned this many times before, but I've done research about it when I was doing my undergraduate degree and stuff. And so I had learned that homeschool was a good thing and it had a lot of really good benefits. But once I started having kids, I was like, this is not, I'm not going to homeschool. It wasn't even something on my radar until my oldest son was struggling in kindergarten. And then we pulled him out and it ended up being for the best. And homeschool is still a struggle sometimes, like a big struggle sometimes. And sometimes it's, a fun, happy learning environment for us. Like it ebbs and flows and you go through different stages that it's all over the place. And so this type of question might be an unpopular opinion for some people and maybe not for others, because maybe other people agree that not everyone should homeschool as well. And so we're going to start with my points there. I don't have a ton of them, but just a few things that I thought of as I was trying to respond to this person about whether or not I thought they should homeschool. The first reason why I think that homeschooling is not for everyone is because it's a big time commitment and not everyone has that time or they're not willing to commit to that time. It requires a lot. Even if you're doing very minimal schoolwork, just the fact that your kids are home that whole time, right? Like the 8 hours that they would be in public school, that's a lot with all of your kids. And it's now your responsibility to have them that whole time and to figure out what activities they can do to make sure they're learning what they're supposed to be learning. And it just requires a lot of your time. And I think sometimes we don't think through that or understand how big of a time commitment it can be. Even if we're only homeschooling one child and the others are in public school, they're still you still have to figure out what to do with them all day long. Are they just tagging along with you with whatever you're doing? When do you sit down and do their schoolwork with them? You still have the responsibility of trying to make the day a good learning environment for this one child or multiple children. And it's a lot, right? I get to the end of the week and I'm just like, oh my gosh. And we only do bookwork type stuff for usually the morning time. Most of the time we're finished. And so The afternoon is a little bit more free time and time for me, time when my littles are napping and things like that. And so I get that sort of a break in the day before the rush of dinner and possible activities and things like that in the evening time and then bedtime. And it's just a lot. I get to Saturdays and I don't want to do anything like outside my home because there's so much to do inside my home. And my kids do chores every single day. We all have responsibilities that we fulfill every day. But since I am doing homeschool with them all morning, there's just not a whole lot of time for me to get done some things that I need to do. And so Saturdays become that day because I will just go crazy if I don't get them done, and other people don't care, and that's totally fine. But I want to have a clean home. I want to be sort of organized and have food prepped and all that kind of stuff and just kind of know what's going on. So number one, it's just a big time commitment. I think if you are considering homeschooling, understand that it's going to take a lot of your time. And you can still have free time. I still have a lot of free time in my day, but you have to really be intentional about that. And you still, even in that free time, have kids that are going to fight occasionally. You know, any system you set up is not going to be perfect 100% of the time. And so even if they're having quiet time, you know, sometimes when I'm filming stuff like this, I have to stop and go and yell at them. Tell them to stop fighting, because even though they're supposed to be doing something quiet and not really interacting with one another, it doesn't mean that that's what's going to happen all the time. And so it is a very time consuming. It's very emotionally consuming as well. And so it's just something that I think you should consider when you were thinking about homeschooling. The second reason I think that homeschooling is not for everyone is because you have to be very committed to it and know your why. Why are you doing it? I think public school can become an easy cop-out if you're like, well, we'll try homeschooling. We have a kid that has maybe an issue at school. We're going to try homeschooling and see if it works. And if it doesn't, we can just send them back to public school. And so you don't really have a solid why of why you're homeschooling. And it's very easy to just give up and just be like, oh, we'll just, after a month, we're just going to send our kids back to school, which again, maybe that's fine for some people, but you really have to understand why you're doing it if you want to continue doing it. This is going to be a funny example, but this is what it made me think of is I have 6 kids. I had the first one, so I was planning to have all of them naturally, but I wasn't as committed to that with the first. I didn't really do a whole lot of prep, and I didn't realize how labor was going to be so bad for me, and that I labor really long and don't dilate, and there was just a whole lot of issues. I just did not understand going in how awful it was going to be. And so with my next 3 kids after him, I also had epidurals, but we lived in Connecticut and they did walking epidurals. And so once you start to push, you can almost feel everything. Not completely, but basically. So then I ended up with a surprise 5th baby, surprise pregnancy with him. And then we had a 6th after. And both of them, when I got pregnant with my 5th, I was like, I'm going to have this baby naturally. I still was induced because I don't go into labor, but I did not have an epidural. And that was my goal. I practiced breathing. I was dedicated to it. I understood that I wanted to do it. I wanted to be able to test my body and to know mentally that I could accomplish something that was very hard for me. And since I had a very strong why behind it, I was able to go through with it not just once, but twice. And even though it was extremely hard, it was so rewarding as well. And I feel like that's the same thing going into anything that you really truly want to accomplish. But with homeschool, if you go into it thinking, if we don't like it, if this doesn't solve the problem, and we can just put them back into public school, then almost 100% of the time, that's what you're going to do. You will not stick with it. And so you need to understand why you want to do it. Have a deeper meaning, a deeper purpose for it. And ours started out as I want to save my child because he's high functioning autistic and was having a really hard time. And it turned into something where I want to be able to learn with my kids. I want to have this continual learning habit in my life, and homeschooling is providing that for our family. And so deeper whys developed as I kept pushing through. And I think that's what we need if we want to continue homeschooling and if we really want to be dedicated to it, even when it's so hard. Some days it is so hard, and in my head, public school sounds really good right now, just like labor. Epidural sounds really good right now. But when you push through, it can be so, so rewarding. And you realize that you're stronger than you thought you were. And I think that is just such a great benefit of homeschooling. Another idea to think about if you are considering homeschooling, or if your child is struggling in public school and you're like, maybe we should homeschool, is just to go through what the issue is. Because sometimes I think we're quick to jump ship either way, right? From homeschool to public school, from public school to homeschool. In anything in our life, sometimes it's easy just to be like, oh, we'll just jump ship and things will be, grass is greener over there. And I think that happens with us seeing our kids struggle at school. We're like, oh, this must mean they're not supposed to be in here. I need to do something different. And yes, maybe you do need to be doing something different, but is the issue they're having, could it be solved maybe by half a day of school? Like if they went to half a day of public school and came home and you focused on just the areas they're struggling with, would that benefit them or not? And work through some of these things. And I think that's helpful just to get to the core of the issue instead of just giving up. Because I think that's easy, to just look at, there's a problem, I don't want to be uncomfortable, I don't want to have to do the work and figure out what's going on or what would be best for my child or for our family. So I'm just going to pull them out of school. And sometimes, since we're not committed to it, we don't have time, that child might really struggle because we don't put in an effort to homeschool them. We just pulled them out of school because there was problems. And so sometimes it's not better for them to be at home. And maybe if they just had some extra after school help, that would make a difference. If you don't have the time, if you're working a lot, or if you really just don't want to homeschool, or maybe a school environment is better for them at this time in their lives, figure out a solution. There probably is one. You just might have to work through it a little bit. You might have to try some different things and see if they're helpful and see if they're not. And it's not necessarily going to be fun, but I feel like in the end, it will be rewarding when you've figured out something that works for your child and works for you, and so much less stress for everyone. My fourth point about why not everyone should homeschool is that public school works really well for a lot of kids. And yes, there are some different things that are taught in public school that might be a little bit sketchy or against your beliefs. There could be some schools that are better or worse, depending, they might teach more extreme things than other ones. Depending where you live, all sorts of factors come into play there. But there's a lot of kids that do really well in public school. I have some kids that would do really well in public school. They'd be totally fine. Some of them would probably even like it better than homeschool. And, we still are homeschooling them. Some people choose to do some kids at public school and some at homeschool. Just kind of depends on their children and what they want in their life, right? What their goals are and things like that. But I think it's important to know that there are a lot of kids that go to public school, and it does a lot of good for a lot of kids. They learn well, they excel. There's a lot of things that can be learned from them going to public school, and it shouldn't be such a negative thing in our minds to have someone go to public school, because I think we get this stigma, or I can't think of the right word right now, but we just are like, oh, that's a bad word in homeschool, public school. Don't say that. That's a bad word. But I think it's really good for some kids, and it works well for a lot of kids. My fifth point is a little similar to my third point, but sometimes I think we just think it will be a quick fix to homeschool. Like I said, we're not willing to put in the work to see if something else will work, maybe half a day of school. Maybe we just need to put in a little bit more work after school with our children. Can we give them 30 minutes a day versus spending 8 hours? Are we committed to those 8 hours? We're not doing school that whole time. Or can we just give them a little extra time after school, and that helps solve what's going on in school. And so I think sometimes we see, again, grass is greener on the other side. It's a quick fix to our problem. And excuse me, I'm gonna like choke over here. And so we're gonna try it. We're just gonna jump ship and try homeschooling. But then in a month, we're gonna jump back to public school because we're like, wait, I am not prepared for this. This is way more than I thought it was. I did not have a strong why. I didn't have anything to prepare me for what this was going to be like and being with my kids all the time. And now this is overwhelming. It's too much. And we don't necessarily think through the fact that what is this doing to our child? You know, we see it, we're like, oh, there's a problem, which maybe they think that there's a problem with them, right? And so we pull them out of school. They're like, oh, because I have a problem. And then stuff's not working at home, so we put them back into school. So mentally, like, they're just on a roller coaster ride and they're already struggling, and yet we're making it worse. So don't jump into something real quick. Most of the time, sometimes that is the best option, but a lot of times we have a little bit of time to like think through, to really evaluate if homeschooling is the best option and not just a quick fix. Okay, we're just pulling them out because I think this will fix the problem, where in reality it might make it 10 times worse. My last point on why not everyone should homeschool might seem a little bit harsh, but I feel like sometimes we look at it as it's a public school problem, but it's really a parent problem. And so that's why we're trying to pull them out. We're trying to find a quick fix or something because we see it as it's a public school problem and not maybe it's something that we're doing. Maybe we are not present enough at home when our kids get out of school. Maybe we aren't sitting down with them and working on their schoolwork. Maybe they need more practice in a certain area of math and we just aren't willing to do it, or we haven't been paying attention. Okay, it might be more of a parent problem than it is a public school problem. And a big part of school in general, whether it's homeschool or public school, is the parent involvement. It makes such a huge difference how the parents are involved. If they know what their kids are doing, if they're helping them, if they're making sure they understand it, in both types of environments, it's going to be a game changer. If they are not present, whether you homeschool or have your kids in public school, kids are not going to be learning. They're going to be miserable no matter the setting. Okay, so if you are not dedicated to trying to teach them as a parent, regardless of their school setting, then whether they're in public school or homeschool, nothing is going to change because you have not changed. Okay, you have to change the way that you are parenting them and helping them to see change in their life and to really understand what's going on with them. And then once you can understand that, real change starts to happen and you will change as a parent and it'll just be a much more rewarding experience. All right, so that was my unpopular opinion about how I don't think everyone should homeschool. It's not the right fit for every single person. And so if you enjoyed this video, please remember to give it a thumbs up. Let me know down in the comments what your ideas are. Remember to keep everything nice. We're trying to create a wholesome learning environment here. But what are your ideas about homeschooling versus public school, or what your experience was if your kids were in public school, if they're now homeschooled? I would love to hear all your insights and it'd probably be helpful for other people watching this video as well. And I will see you next time.